Hi everyone, this is NUSensei. I've had a few people ask me about buying bows from eBay and AliExpress, and there are several brands which stand out. Now the reason why this may be a common thing for a lot of people is simply the logistics and cost of getting bows sent to you. For many people, the cost of shipping a bow from a major store may be too expensive, and buying a budget bow with cheap shipping from eBay or AliExpress or Amazon might be a better choice. So one of the brands I'll be looking at today will be Nika Archery. I've got two bows. The first one we're covering today is the Nika Archery ET-2 Brotherhood. So this is what you get when you order the bow. You get the riser, you get your limbs, as well as a bowstring with the no glove rubber guards already attached, as well as a hex wrench. So firstly, taking a look at the riser, it is a die cast CNC magnesium alloy, and you can see that on camera it's a matte black finish. In my opinion, it kind of came out more unfinished. It's a very rough look for a riser. You can see where a lot of the cost has been cut. You would expect a bit more smoothness or gloss, especially around the grip area, but the whole thing is made from a single piece of magnesium, and to me it doesn't feel great for a beginner. I'm comparing this to other bows of similar price range, and this doesn't mean it's a bad bow, but it doesn't look like it's well finished. You can see some of the injection lines for the mold in some places. So yeah, it's a rough riser. Again, doesn't mean it's bad, it's just a little rough on the looks. I should note right away, it is an ambidextrous riser. There aren't many bows in the market which are designed to be shot from both sides. This is definitely one of them, so if you're looking for an ambidextrous bow, this is something worth looking at. Additionally, the limb pocket system is ILF. Yes, I have put in win-and-win limbs on this riser. It does work. I'm actually shot with win-and-win limbs. They do fit the pocket. I also believe that with some adjustment, you can alter this to fit the formula limbs from Hoyt. Not sure if it's official, but it is in the documentation. You can unscrew this, or at least you can unscrew the limbs over here and mount the formula pocket on as well. So there is some flexibility in this system. You can see again some of the riser design choices. There's some really weird cutouts, which I imagine to reduce weight. The one I dislike the most is this one here. The one at the grip kind of looks out of place because many beginners will hold the bow like this. And when you hold it like this, your fingers surround a very thin piece of magnesium here. This doesn't feel solid. I'd rather have a solid piece here. You don't see many bows with a hollow grip, and it just doesn't feel quite right. You also might find if you wrap your fingers around, it may get caught on the edge here. So the grip design's a little rough. Also bear in mind, the ambidextrous grip, it is symmetrical, so you don't have that perfect feel for a one-handed grip. So you can hold this fairly decently, but not great with both hands. I do also find that the shelf on the opposite side can rough up your thumb because, again, ambidextrous design. If you're holding it and you're shooting and you have a high grip like this, you might find that the shelf will kind of scrape your thumb. So do bear in mind there are some physical limitations when using this kind of bow. I want to also point out that the riser does not come with an arrow rest. I did put my own. It is possible to shoot off the shelf, though with the rough metal, I don't really feel that it's great to shoot off the shelf, and if you do, you definitely need feathered arrows. I personally stuck on a Hoyt zipper rest. I think it's better to shoot off a rest than off the shelf for this bow. But do keep in mind that if you're buying the bow as a one-off purchase for a beginner kit, you may need to add this to make it shootable. Apart from the hole for a screw-in rest, there's nothing for a sight. So if you're shooting sights, you can't mount one. You do have, strangely, have a stabilizer bushing, It is quite low on the riser compared to the limbs. Makes sense given it's a small riser, but yeah, I'd probably be using this as a bare bow and not with sights or stabilizers. And here we have the limb. It's a nice red and black design with the branding there. Do note this is a pure fiberglass limb. There is no wood in this, hence why low cost and also low weight. I believe the website says it's 15 to 25 pound. That we measured this at 28 inches. It's around 18 pound and it's about 15 pound at my draw length. So the draw weight is a little deceptive. It would be nice to see a clearer, definitive draw weight as measured at 28 inches, but it doesn't actually do that. There are some strange other marketing things on the product page. One thing is the limb tip. It specifically mentions how it's meant to be a non-slip, anti-dislocation, some sort of thing. Basically, the limb tip is designed so that the string won't come off. This to me is a strange thing. It works just fine, by the way, but it's a very odd thing to advertise because the string never comes off. Even if it might be if you put it on incorrectly, it might slip, and that might be why it's designed this particular way. But it specifically talks about how if you draw it back too far, the string might come off. So they've designed this limb tip to prevent that. I don't think it's necessary. It's impossible to pull a string off a bow unless you draw it back to like 40 inches or something. So it's a bit over-engineered. It emphasizes it a bit too much for my liking. It's a standard limb tip with an odd design. And then we have the string. This is a pretty typical Dacron string. It is bright orange, which is pretty cool. And it does come with the finger guards already on. Now, if you shoot without finger guards, in other words, you use a finger tab, then you have to remove these because it assumes that you're shooting with finger guards. These by default come together. You can move them if you're shooting split finger. Otherwise, it works fine. I do have a gripe with the limb pocket system. It's actually hard to slide in because the way the limb pocket is designed, there's no wedge or place to push the spring on the limb to lock in place. Normally you just click it in like that, but you need to engage this groove here. And to do that, you kind of have to push the button in a bit first, and then you can get into the groove. So there we go. It's slightly trickier. It locked in fine, nothing wrong with that. But that extra step in having to depress the spring can be a little counterintuitive. So if you're buying this bow as a first bow and it doesn't quite connect, you keep in mind that you have to push this down to get it into the limb groove here. For most other risers, this is not necessary, but there's just no place for you to engage it without kind of pushing down first. It's much easier that way. And this is the bow fully assembled. As you can see, it's a 60-inch bow. I have to admit, the black look actually is quite nice. If you're buying a beginner bow based on looks, this isn't too bad. It feels pretty light for a beginner bow, which is quite desirable, and it actually feels a bit better than it looks. So let's give it some test shots. So here we are. I'm using Eastern Vector 1400s, I believe. These arrows are rated for 10 to 22 pound. This is a 15 pound bow at my draw length, so this is the lowest I can go really. So let's see how it handles. Oh, well, it works. I admit, when I first used this bow, I kind of came in a little pessimistic. I didn't think it would feel that great. The fact that it is such a light bow is a huge asset to it. It's a little too light, in fact, but the magnesium alloy riser actually feels just right for a beginner. It feels different to a wooden bow. It's a little heftier, a little better balance, I guess, but it doesn't feel heavy. It's not an aluminium riser. And the string seems to work fine, the limbs work fine. It's fiberglass, but it flings arrows fine. And I can group with it. As long as your technique and alignment are correct, it seems to be just fine. It's really hard to feel back tension when using a 15-pound bow. So far the bow feels alright. It sounds okay, flings arrows okay. No real issues at the moment. I do notice some clearance issues with the arrows. That's mostly a tuning thing. It's quite hard to get a good tuned arrow for a 15-pound bow. So you might hear a slight clack on release. That's probably the back of the arrow hitting the riser. You can see there are some marks here, so that's more of a tuning thing rather than the bow. But I do bear in mind the cutter isn't perfect because it is ambidextrous. Still, the arrows do fly straight. You can shoot accurately with this bow. So yeah, it feels like a pretty good learning bow. As you can see, even with slightly off-tune arrows, you can group with it. You've got one bad shot here. Apart from that, you can group with it. So as far as I'm concerned, the bow functions, therefore it passes that test. My thoughts on the ET-2 Brotherhood from Nika Archery. I think that as a learning bow, it gets a pass grade. It functions, you can shoot groups with it at short distance. And the lightweight makes it very easy to use. So if you're an absolute beginner and you want a bow for a low price off eBay or AliExpress, then the ET-2 passes. I didn't think that the grip was as bad as I said it was. I know I said earlier in the video that it felt weird in the hand, but when shooting it, I didn't really notice it. I think the biggest asset is the ambidexterity. The fact you can use this right and left-handed is a really good thing. Do bear in mind that the grip is actually fairly small, so if you've got bigger hands, this actually will be uncomfortable to use. But apart from that, the handling of the bow is pretty decent. Even the fiberglass limbs, considering this is meant to be a learning bow, it works fine. I think this is actually a thumbs up. I was honestly surprised. I thought that the performance would be a lot worse, but considering again, this is a very light bow, there's not much which is wrong with it. So if you just want to have a bow to learn with, then this is okay. Now, the things which I would note about the ET-2. The bow itself is okay, but whether or not you buy this, well, there are several other things to keep in mind. The first thing to note, and really the most important thing, is the price. Depending on where you get this from, you could be spending from 80 to 100 US dollars to up to 120 US dollars. And that's pricey for a bow like this, in my opinion. You can get better bows for equal or lower prices. And in addition to that, if you spend a bit more, you can get a much better long-term bow. You can get a wooden recurve, the Samick Polaris or Samick Sage type bows around 140 US dollars, and that will last you longer than one of these. And that's kind of my main gripe. I feel the price point is too high for what is essentially a day one bow, which will last you for a month or two, depending on how serious you take archery. So that's one problem. The second thing is where you see yourself upgrading in the following months. This bow does not come with replaceable limbs. As far as I know, you can't buy the limbs separate, and it only comes in one kind of limb. So if you want to progress in draw weight, and considering how light the limbs are, you will want to do so fairly shortly. You don't really have any options. You can buy IOF limbs like any other brand and attach them. Again, the pockets are a little clunky, but they do work. But any limb you buy will basically cost more than the bow itself. And at that point, would you really want to have a low-cost budget ambidextrous riser as a platform for a much more expensive limb? So, in my opinion, if you're looking at a long-term interest in archery where you want to start with a cheap bow and then upgrade, I wouldn't recommend this bow. I think it's a much safer choice to buy a fairly decent or even a budget level IOF riser and then get limbs as you go along instead of start from here. You'll probably skip this step. If you don't intend to progress in archery anytime soon and you just want a bow to learn with, not to shoot with, but to learn with, because I think this is a learning bow, it doesn't really work well beyond short distance, then I think this is, again, that budget level, which is purely optional. I think really the only people who would really get the most out of this bow are people who can't get other bows at a reasonable shipping price. That's really the only thing. Because like I said, at the cost this sells at on eBay, Amazon, AliExpress, you could buy a much better bow for $10 or $20 more. So I don't want to give this a negative review because the bow actually works. But when you consider the way it's being sold right now, it's hard to justify the value for money. That I think is the biggest down point. The bow itself is okay. Again, it's mostly for beginners, and the biggest unique part of the bow is the ambidexterity. If you are looking at an ambidextrous bow that is just easy to put together and use without second thought, this is worth looking at. Though again, remember, it only comes in a very light draw weight. So overall, as a bow, pass grade, it shoots okay, it's fine to learn with, but as a bow which you want to keep around and shoot with, I don't think this has much staying power. So those are my overall thoughts. Bows are okay, but it's hard to recommend in a market where you can get equally good bows or better bows for the same price. This is NUSensei, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.